In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast, brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. My name's Ben Grant, joined as always by JB. We've got another exciting episode for you today, and a really busy one. There was a lot of Argos news this week. The main focus of this episode is going to be the schedule breakdown. Last week, we recorded the day before the schedule release, and we promised you a breakdown. We'll give you what we think, and that's going to be the real meat and potatoes of this episode. But there was also a lot of Argos news this week, including the releasing of 3 players, all of which I found somewhat surprising. We signed another receiver, and there was the unfortunate passing of Toronto Argonauts legendary defensive end and Grey Cup champion, Rick Moore. And we'll talk about all of these things on today's episode, and we'll wrap it up with our schedule breakdown, all coming up on this week's episode of the X's and Argos podcast. All right, let's get into the 3 players that the Argonauts released. So defensive back, Ermin Lane, receiver, Joel Davis, and quarterback, Kelly Bryant. I don't want to say I'm stunned, because I didn't have any of these 3 guys penciled in as starters, but I am surprised that they would be released this early. And now from our perspective, we don't know what goes on. We don't know how things are going in meetings. We don't know how mutual these decisions are. Maybe these players want to pursue other opportunities. We don't know. And so we're just kind of coming at it with what we can see. And from the outside, I just don't feel like these moves make a lot of sense. I can see why with Kelly Bryant, the quarterback, a little bit more clearly, but let's take a quick look at them one by one. So you got Joel Davis. He's still young. He's 26, and he's an established punt returner and kickoff returner. And that was why I was so surprised to see him go, because that's something that we don't have a definite answer for in this club. There are other guys who have done it, but I don't think there's anyone you can point to and say, well, clearly he's going to be the guy. So, like, why would you cut a receiver like Joel Davis at this stage in the year before we even get to camp, JB?
I would imagine they have somebody in mind for the kick returning. It is possible we're going to see a big wave of guys being cut. It's so hard to know in such a weird scenario how much, what's going on behind the scenes. Are players not interested in coming to Canada in the CFL protocols? Have there been Zoom meetings and issues around who's on Zoom and who is not? It's so hard to know what is happening in the background in such a weird situation.
And I just hate to give up on a guy like this who at 26, because he has proven himself as an athlete. He's really exciting to watch. He actually got playing time with the Giants, returning kicks, returning punts. He has some receiving stats with the Giants. And so then we have to look at, well, who are they thinking is going to return kicks? And I guess Terrell Singfeld and Chandler Worthy are probably the 2 names that jump out. I'm pretty interested to see Daniel Braverman. He can do both jobs. And then other than that, it's getting a little thin. I love Dejon Brissett as a kickoff returner. I'm not sure they're going to put him out there. We'll have to see. I think we'll definitely see Craig Rucker return some punts. He's got a little bit of that pinball magic. Yeah, I'm not comparing the 2. They're not the same. He's got miles and miles to go before he can really, truly be compared. But he's 5'7", 160. You watch some of that punt return magic that he has at Mars Hill. And that's pretty exciting. So I would love to see Craig Rucker get some punt return opportunities. But I was expecting to see Joel Davis thrown into the mix with these guys. But maybe they've just decided, like, we don't have time for that to also be a camp battle. There's so many camp battles that are going to be going on at the receiver and cornerback position. We can't also afford to have a lengthy punt return, kickoff return battle. So maybe that weighed in. I don't know. I can't think of why else you would release Joel Davis, but it might be like you said, maybe it's something behind the scenes that we don't have access to that led to this decision. Let's move on to Ermin Lane, who was released. This one, came as a shock because he'd
I know
become
that's my guy.
well, he'd become an Argo fan Twitter favorite, like in the Twitterverse. He's so active, and he was just talking continuously about how excited he was to get up to Toronto. And I don't think I saw tweets from any other player that was American born that seemed this excited to come up north and play. And so Argo Twitter fell in love with him. And to see him cut here was upsetting. And his film's so good. And this is a guy that has never gotten a break. We've talked about him extensively on this show. He feels like a friend of the program. But he just never got a break. You remember he was the most recruited wide receiver coming out of high school, ended up at Florida State. They moved him to the defensive side of the ball. And even there, his position switched around, and he just never really got to stick in one spot to really prove what he could do. So I was really excited to see him come in. I had him penciled in behind Alden Darby at free, and I thought he would look fantastic there. And what better man to sort of tutor you or mentor you than Alden Darby out there at free safety. I thought it was the perfect position for him. But again, there must be something we don't know, because they got rid of Mike Tyson last week. So two guys that I thought were going to be natural free safeties are suddenly off the team. And now who's behind Alden Darby at free? And we don't know 100% that that's where he'll be, but it's looking more and more like it. Like, are they going to bring the three Canadians in behind Darby? Are they now looking to have a Canadian backup at free because they have that flexibility? Who knows?
It speaks to me to a belief that we need to have players who are good to go, plug and play. Not going to be much of a camp. It's going to be hit the ground running. And this is not, unfortunately, the time for developmental projects. It's just, I think that there are going to be guys who get squeezed out because you need to be able to go right away and be able to work the program. And I just think there's no time to have a player who can't do that. And he was clearly going to be raw and a project. And, if I were to take an outside objective guess, not knowing any background, that he was seen as a project, and, they're looking to have guys who can go day one with the program and do not need a ton of development.
And the Kelly Bryant release, I'm upset about because I know how exciting a player he is, and I was really looking forward to see him sling it around. It's interesting that it was Bryant and not Nick Tiano, because I know a lot of people have penciled Kelly Bryant in ahead of Nick Tiano. I really like Nick Tiano. I'm a fan. I love his Chattanooga film. I think he looks very much like a CFL quarterback.
It did make sense from a program point of view. If you're looking at pocket quarterbacks, clearly the top two quarterbacks are pocket quarterbacks, and it makes more sense that you might have Tiano following along that program. My only concern is that we don't end up seeing Nick Tiano starting for the Calgary Stampeders in the Grey Cup in 2 years.
Well, we have a long history of providing the rest of the CFL with excellent quarterbacks. So I expect it. Like I've said this many times before, like Dakota Prukop is the next great former Toronto Argonaut quarterback. And I think Nick Tiano may end up on that list as well. He looks really good. I'm so impressed. Every time I watch Tiano film, I get pretty excited. But he's going to take some time. Like Macbeth has said, it takes about 3 years to really figure it out in the CFL, and that's why this keeps happening to Toronto. They do such a great job of scouting these guys, bringing them up, but then he spends like 2 or 3 years behind the established starter, signs somewhere else, and then runs away with it. So maybe that's what's in Tiano's future. The Argos made a signing this week. Jalen Smith, receiver from Louisville. Now, you will have seen him at least in someone else's highlights. He was the primary target for Lamar Jackson when Lamar Jackson was quarterbacking the Louisville Cardinals. So he's a fairly big name. I remember there being a lot of fuss over him in Lamar Jackson's 2 seasons where he was really lighting up the NCAA. But then he kind of fell off the map in his senior year in, I think that was 2018, with a different quarterback. And so I went back and looked at a lot of his film from both 2017 and 2018, and he looks like a totally different player. This worries me a little bit because when I started taking notes on what I saw from Jalen Smith, I don't see what it is that the Argos brass are seeing. And they obviously see something. They're looking at the film. There's no way that they're looking at the film that I have and they're saying, wow, this film makes him look great, because it's not there. It's something else. They've seen something that I haven't seen, or they've heard something that I haven't heard, because on film alone, I don't see the reason to bring Jalen Smith in here. So what are the possibilities?
Being an NFL camp cut is always going to get you a ticket to the league, to at least be given a shot. So that's in his favor to have been the last cut on the last day from Baltimore. He was in camp in Baltimore in 2019, and we do have some guys, Shane Ray. I think there's a couple of other guys who had a cup of coffee with the Baltimore Ravens, and it may be an internal vouching that this guy has the ability to be, a nice professional possession receiver. I don't know. At this point, honestly, it feels a bit like a camp body.
You might have hit on something interesting there, because we do have ties to both the Baltimore Ravens and Seattle Seahawks, where he spent some practice squad time. And like you said, he was in the last series of cuts with the Ravens, spent time on the Seahawks practice roster. So I think he spent a whole season on the Seahawks practice roster. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But we have ties to both of those clubs. And so maybe someone said something. Maybe someone spoke up and said, hey, you know what? You got to take a look at this guy. He's a great worker. He puts the time in. He's a really intelligent receiver who's going to pick up the offense quickly. I think someone has clearly said something, because it's not on that film. He looks good and he grades well in Lamar Jackson's last two seasons, because he's so wide open, because the defense is so paranoid about Lamar's speed that he has these giant open windows, and so it's easy for him. But yeah, that the 2018 tape is not the same, and he doesn't look fast. He doesn't change direction well. He doesn't seem to have natural hands. And there's a lot of body catches. His route running's not great. He's not a great blocker or a physical player for his size. And it's weird, because at the NFL Combine he ran a 4.4. I had to double check that twice. I went back and forth. I'm like, wait a second, do I have the right Jalen Smith here? Because he doesn't look like a 4.4 player on film. And I wonder if it's something to do with his training and his size, because I noticed that, like in the Louisville program, he was listed at 6'4", 227. And at the Combine, he measured 6'2" and weighed in at 219. So obviously he didn't shrink. So he was always 6'2". But I wonder if he was playing at 227 and then he ran his 4.4 in the two teens, which could have been enough to maybe get a significantly faster time. Because there's no clip that you'll see of him where you think, wow, there's a guy with blazing 4.4 speed. So maybe that's what's happened. But some guys just don't play the way that they run on the track. Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. And so maybe that's the case with Jalen Smith. But for me, instead of looking at this in a negative way, I'm actually really excited about him, because I want to know what I don't see. There's something. These guys aren't randomly bringing in some guy who doesn't look good on film. So I can't wait to see what it is. Unfortunately, this week, the Argos lost a member of their family in the passing of former defensive end Rick Moore and CFL All-Star Rick Moore. It's a really tragic loss. And for those that don't know who Rick Moore is, I thought I'd give you just a brief background on him. He didn't play for that long with the Argonauts, but he made a huge impact. And this is back in the early 80s. He's one of the first, I think he might be the first defensive player that I idolized. I was far more drawn to the offensive side of the ball as a kid, because I think kids generally are. And so, I was in love with Conrad Holloway, which I've talked about extensively. But Rick Moore jumped off the screen for me as a kid. And I remember him in that Grey Cup game in 83 when the defense as a whole just absolutely shut down the Lions in the second half. And he was a big part of that. Rick Moore, still to this day, is third all time in sacks in a season with 15.5, which he set in that 1983 season when he was a CFL All-Star. He's behind only James Curry and Rodney Harding. And that's a pretty impressive place to be this many years later. That record set in 1983. So yeah, he was a phenomenal player. And what I loved about him even more than what he did for us on the field, and especially in that season, that 83 season, After he retired and after he left Toronto, he continued to be a fan of the game and a fan of the league. He was a great ambassador for the CFL. And everyone that I've spoken to over the last few days who got to know him said he was a tremendous guy. So our thoughts are with his wife Rhonda and his kids, Tanner, Samantha, Dakota, Brittany, and Matthew. Rick Moore, gone too soon at the age of 61. All right, it is time, JB, to break down the 2021 Toronto Argonauts schedule. Let's maybe go through initial reactions, because my initial reaction was to spit coffee all over my room. What was yours?
My initial reaction was that it was worst case Ontario. It is a brutal start to the schedule. It was exactly what we hoped it wouldn't be. We're out west. There's no two ways about it. It's a very tough schedule. It is a harder schedule than the Alouettes, who will be our primary competitor for that playoff spot. It's a big ask of Toronto. I think that if the league had a response to Toronto being the offseason chance, I think the league response is go pound sand, Toronto.
Yeah, this feels deliberate. I don't know how the intricacies of schedule making work. I'm sure there are a lot of things that need to happen for a schedule to fall in place, but this this schedule, and if you haven't seen it yet, the problem with it is that we got 4 games against Hamilton, who are sort of the consensus favorites at this point to at least be a very strong regular season football team. And nobody else has to play 4 games against anybody of that caliber. The good thing is, those are some more games that we get to see in person. We can travel over to Hamilton. We can, obviously see them in Toronto. So for Argos fans, depending on what ticket sales are like, there is some advantage to the accessibility of these games. But man, not only do you have Hamilton 4 times, we've got Winnipeg twice. The only West team that we play twice, and it's Winnipeg. So we've got the Grey Cup matchup already in 6 of our 14 games. Plus, you throw in the usual assortment of Saskatchewan and Calgary, and man, this is a difficult schedule. By far, the most difficult schedule in the league.
There will be no sneaking into the playoffs with this schedule. I mean, on the plus side, if I could rarely do, look at the positive, if we are able to grind out a playoff position, we will be battle tested. So if we can get into the playoffs with this schedule, we will be ready to really do some damage in the playoffs, because there will be no question we will have seen the bar and we will have played elite competition all season. So I do think that is in our favor. I think that any coach will tell you that a tough schedule is good. Where you run into problems is when a tough schedule becomes an impossible schedule. And, I'm not going to say that's where we are yet, but it teeters upon it. We do end pretty well. You look at, 3 of the last 4 were at home. We're at home to the Alouettes, at home to the Lions, at home to the Ticats in the final game. There's probably a decent chance that the Ticats won't need that game for anything. So if you were looking for positives, I do think that the end of the season is decent in the schedule. But are we going to be 2-6?
You got to take one of those Hamilton games. You have to take one of those 2 Hamilton games. In game 5 and 6, you play back-to-back, short rest. I think you almost go into game 5 with a let's figure out as much as we can figure out, and then try to turn on game 6. Like, I'm not saying you go into game 5, not trying to win. You're trying to win every game you play. But I think you really are trying to collect data as much as you can in game 5 and have yourself prepped so that you're in a position as soon as you get back to Toronto following that game, that you can hammer out a terrific game plan to take them down at home in that 6th game of the season, because you need one of those 2 games. You can't come out of that. You can't come out of any of these back-to-backs losing both. There's just no room for that.
And it's a tremendous litmus test, or it's a tremendous test of a coaching staff. I think when 2 teams play back-to-back, you immediately are going to see the superior coaching staff, because you play a game and then you break down the film and you come back next week and you're not going to be able to install much. So who can stop the other team from doing what they like to do better? If you play later in the season, could be new plays, new formations. I think that's a bit of a coin toss. But when you play back to back and essentially you're going to be running the same plays, I think it will really reveal a lot. And I think that's a big ask. I mean, the Winnipeg coaching staff and the Hamilton coaching staff are, very good coaching staffs.
Why don't we go through the games here and see what we initially see as wins and losses? And we'll keep this, we'll refer to it maybe halfway through the season and see how we're doing. But this is so preliminary because we've never even seen this group of Argonauts on a field together. But why don't we go through this schedule and see what we think the Argos record is going to be by the end of it. So we open at Calgary, August 7th. Calgary's home opener. I'm going to chalk this down as a loss. I think it's just a really tough ask to come out of the gate and win this first game. So I think we lose that first game at Calgary. JB, what do you have down, a win or a loss?
I think it's you're going to have a crowd. It's a Calgary home opener. They go bananas for football out there. If we could steal a win there, my God.
That'd be amazing.
I think we really have something. I think it's probably unfair to ask. I certainly wouldn't hold the loss against the Argos. I think that's a big ask.
Then our next two games are against Winnipeg. It's a home and home, starting in Winnipeg and then finishing in Toronto. I think we split these. I think it probably goes loss-win for me, but I think there's possibilities here. I think we could even sneak out that first game because I don't think Winnipeg is anywhere near as good as most people think they are. I think they got hot at the right time. Yes, they won the Grey Cup, but they weren't an amazing team heading into that. They played well at the right time. They got a little bit of luck, but this wasn't a team that was crushing people. Our 2019 Argos beat that same Grey Cup winning Blue Bomber team. They can be beat. And so I'm not nearly as worried about Winnipeg as I am about Hamilton. So I think we split, and I think that probably goes loss then win for me. How do you see it, JB?
Yeah, I agree. Winnipeg is not that strong. We have to beat Winnipeg, one of those two. I'm going to get behind the guys that are going to be able to do it. I think we win the home opener. I think if we have crowds, that really helps. But I think we win the home opener, and we're 1-2.
Our fourth game is home against Edmonton, the Elks. That's a 7:30 Thursday game. This one, I think, will be a really interesting game to see where both teams stand. Edmonton's had a fair amount of turnover as well. They've got some new coaches, and they're going to be trying to gel early. They're going to go through some similar struggles, I think, that the Argos will in those first three games. And so that fourth game may be a pretty good test to see where both teams are checking in. I'm going to give the advantage to the Argonauts. They're at home. And I think this is a win. And I think that evens up our record now at 2-2. How do you see this game against Edmonton?
Yeah, they have a couple more days rest than we will. It's a short week. The Edmonton plays on the 19th against the Lions. So they'll have a little bit of an advantage there. I think that's probably an easier game than our Winnipeg game. And they'll have a couple more days. But still, this travel to Toronto. And I think, again, it's going to be, I think that's one we got to circle. I think we have to circle those two home games as two games that we really need to come away with.
And we're heading into an artificial bye now, which I think is a great place to have it. If we're 2-2 heading into that, what is now like a 10-day rest, basically, I think this is a great time to kind of, regroup, see what's working, see what's not. There might be some changes, some positional changes. Some guys brought in, some guys brought out, some solutions to inevitable injuries. And now we've got the back-to-back with Hamilton. So at Hamilton on Labor Day, and then a few days later at home hosting the Ticats. I don't see us winning that Labor Day game. We struggle in Hamilton, and that place is going to be nuts like it always is. And that Labor Day Classic it's so hard to win there.
If we win that Labor Day game, I am buying Grey Cup tickets. I'm going to buy Grey Cup tickets and Grey Cup hoodie wear we are winning the Grey Cup if we win the Labor Day game in Hamilton.
All right. Will you also buy me Grey Cup tickets?
I will. I will buy you Grey Cup tickets. We are going. It is a lock. If we win in Hamilton on Labor Day, all bets are off. This thing is heading to a parade.
Okay, well, I'm going to pencil that in as a loss for myself, but I really hope we win that game, even more so now because of the Grey Cup possibilities. Is this a loss for you?
I see it as a loss. I think that's a pretty big ask of a team with a lot of turnover.
Man, that'll be a great test, though. You'll know where we are, right? We'll have a really good sense of where we are in Game 5.
We will.
Oh, I'm excited about this. I can't wait for the season. All right, Game 6, we're back at home. I think this is a win. I think this coaching staff, this is their moment to prove themselves. Like you said, short rest, short turnaround, same team. Neither team is going to have a ton of time to add a bunch of stuff. I think our veteran players know how to get games like this won. And I think it's really hard to beat the same professional football team twice in 2 weeks. I think the Argos win this one at home to even us back up at 3-3. What's your call?
Yep, me too. I'm gonna put until proven differently. I'm gonna put full confidence into the coaching staff, and I believe that we have the staff to coach it up, and exactly that we're gonna come back and beat the team in a back-to-back, because you shouldn't lose a back-to-back unless there's a huge talent disparity. If the talent is close, you should split when you play another team.
Game 7 is a pretty tough one. It's sort of a perfect storm of bad things happening. So it's at Saskatchewan, which is tough to start with. It's always hard to play at Saskatchewan. This one it's a late game. It's a 9:45 start. So your schedule is thrown off a little bit. It is a full week later, so it's not like we're out on a short rest. But coming off the emotional high of beating Hamilton the week before and then going to Saskatchewan is a recipe for disaster. I think this is going to be a really tough game. And again, it's one of those games where if they can find a way to win it, I think it says a lot about the coaching staff. I think it says a lot about the caliber of players that we've got. But until I see that from this team, I got to pencil this in as a loss.
No, I don't like going to Saskatchewan. It may pay off in the playoffs, as I mentioned, in terms of the battle-tested team, but that's a pretty big ask. I think Saskatchewan is very good. So I would say no, that's not a win there for us.
Montreal in week 8, home against the Alouettes. This is kind of a must-win game, or it may be. It depends how Montreal gets out of the gates.
I think that this is absolutely one of the pivot games. Must win. Have to happen.
It's huge. It's crucial. We've got a full week's rest. It's another Friday night football. 7:30 start at home. It just has to be a win. And I think Toronto's a much better team. I think by the time we get to the 8th game of the season, we'll have ourselves together. This will now be the Toronto Argonauts, not a group of players still learning a system, still getting accustomed to things. I think once we hit that week 6 win against the Tiger Cats, I think you're now getting the full Toronto Argonauts experience when you take on the Boatmen. So I think this is actually going to be a statement win against Montreal Friday, September 24th. Mark it down. That's a game you want to attend. I think we blow out the Alouettes.
Yeah, I love it too. I think it's absolutely a priority, that game. If we could be 4-4 heading into the bye with our second half schedule, that would be fantastic. It would be absolutely, I would say we are absolutely locked in for a playoff position if we can get through that. That would be amazing if we could get there. I'm really hoping that week 8 game is important and is a pivot game. So, it's going to be, look, there's no two ways about it. This is a brutal front 8 for the Argos, and now we'll see if our excitement over the talent gathered is justified. I think it is, and I do think that 4-4 is a definite possibility. But
if you're 4-4 or 3-5 at that point, I think the bye is a really positive thing. I think you go into that saying, we weathered that storm, that impossible season that the league screwed us with is now over.
Yeah.
And now we can eat. But you've got to be 3-5, because if you go into that bye week and you've been hammered repeatedly week after week, it's going to be harder to buy in. And all these new guys that are together, there's going to be friction. There's going to be anger, animosity. There's going to be people feeling like they should be getting more time and people feeling like so-and-so is responsible. It's just so hard to keep a team together that is failing on the field, that is not producing results. It's really tough. And when you have that extra long week to think about it, it doesn't always go well. So I think it's crucial that you've got at least 3, but hopefully 4 wins heading into our first official bye week after that September 24th game.
Yeah, and who knows what impact all of the COVID protocols, whether they continue with that or those alter as we get further into the summer. Everything's pretty fluid, but it can only increase, teams' temperature level in terms of the restrictions being put on them, especially if you're an American in Canada and, everybody back home is, living La Vida Loca and, you're inside a room. It is a recipe for a problem. If the protocols stay as they do, it definitely is the kind of situation where you want to be winning and competing in games to keep people from chafing against the restrictions that are currently on them. Now we'll see if those change a little, but I think that is a huge factor to this season.
Our 9th game is home to Ottawa. You've had that long rest, time to plan and recover. You have to produce. You can't not show up for this game against Ottawa. You only play Ottawa twice this year. You have to win both. And so coming back after the bye, this has to be a win. I'm penciling it down as a win right now. Wednesday, October 6th. We've got 2 games in really close proximity of each other, 2 games in 5 days. And you've got to win that first one against the Red Blacks.
No, because then we are sent once again into the Lions' Den
on Thanksgiving for a 1:00 start.
I mean, somebody in the CFL office is having a laugh. Come on, what? I mean, in Hamilton Labor Day, in Hamilton Thanksgiving. Okay, CFL.
I'm penciling that second one in as a loss. So the 2-game series, I got a win versus Ottawa, a loss Thanksgiving to Hamilton. How do you see that?
Yeah, that's a loss in Hamilton. I think that's too big an ask from an absolutely loaded team with a first-round pick tight end.
Yeah, that's right. We can keep bringing that up every time we want to say something bad about Hamilton. Now we've got another mini bye, 11 days of rest, and then you sail into your last 4 games, which I think are all winnable games. So
100%.
I'm going to put these all together. So it's at Montreal, and then you're home to BC, at Ottawa, and then home to Hamilton. So if I look at these 4 games together, they've got to at least win 3 of these 4. I actually think they win all 4. I think you can beat Montreal at Montreal. I just think Toronto's a better team, and they're going to be a pretty well-oiled machine by this point and far more rested than the Alouettes going into that game. I think that's a win. I think BC traveling all the way across the country to come here is a huge disadvantage. I don't think the Lions are that great, so I think that's a win too. Ottawa, like I said, you've got to win, so that's 3 in a row now. And I think we could see a Hamilton team that's kind of stepping off the gas a little bit. Plus, I think we're now ready for them by this stage in the season. We're at home again. I see that as win, 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 win. 4 wins in a row to end the season. How do you see that stretch?
Agreed. I think the end of the season really works out for us. What will be crucial will be heading into the Week 11 bye is having 4 or 5 wins. I think if we head into that Week 11 bye with 4 or 5 wins, then you're looking at an 8-9 win season, and that's going to be enough to get number 2 in the East.
So in the most boring manner possible, we have picked the exact same result for every single game throughout the entire season. There's not even one game where we've picked a different result. So this is clearly how it's going to go down. Your Toronto Argonauts finished the regular season 9-5, which gets them into the playoffs. and they've got an extra bye week to prep for their playoff matchup. I think that's pretty good, and I don't think we're being overly homery in this. I think maybe we gave Toronto the benefit of the doubt on a couple occasions, but I think 9-5 is what we're looking at.
And if we play Hamilton in the playoffs, I mean, that'll be the 5th time we played Hamilton. And I know as a coach, you don't often hear it's hard to beat a team 5 times as an expression, but I would argue it is hard to beat a team 5 times in a season. So, yeah, I mean, we'll know. I mean, we'll know. I mean, I think those are the signpost games. I think that getting one of those first games in week 1, 2, 3, and making sure that we get to 4 wins by week 11, I think those are definitely the signposts for the Argos.
I want to play Hamilton in the playoffs. I've just decided that. That's who I want to see most in the playoffs.
I mean, yeah.
We will know them inside and out. I put our roster against Hamilton's once it's ready. The only thing that Hamilton has going for them right now over us is the continuity. They've got a great roster too. I think these are the 2 best rosters in the CFL. But at the end of the season, our guys will have gelled and they'll be up to speed. I can't wait to play Hamilton in week 14. I just hope it may not mean something for them, but I think this team has got what it takes to beat Hamilton in the playoffs. I would welcome a 5th game against the Tiger Cats, but I'll take on anybody. I think if this Toronto team can get to the playoffs, I think they win the Grey Cup anyway. I think the challenge is they've got to get there, and everything the league seemingly could do to prevent that has been installed. So we'll see. But man, if they can get there, this team will do some damage.
Agreed.
Well, that will just about do it for us on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. Thanks so much for listening. As always, check out all of our stuff that you can find at xsandargos.com. For JB, my name's Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the fight.